had camp day today, visiting day this morning. And then I had to run to the doctors. It's just kind of crazy, so sorry about this. I'm a little bit discombobulated. Like, I didn't know about the Frolik and Hayes signing right away either, so I'm getting there. All right. Let me just get this over to the website so I can just put it out there so people know where we are.
Yeah, and today, while you're doing that, today is a big day in Buffalo because today is the deadline. Going off hockey for a second, today is the deadline that competing groups have to get their letter of intent in to buy the Buffalo Bills. And former Sabre owner Tom Golisano and current Sabre owner Terry Pegula are two of a number of potential ownership candidates that have expressed interest in the Bills, along with John Bon Jovi and the MLS&E, Ed Rogers, and
wow.
Yeah, that Larry Tannenbaum is the other potential part owner of that group, and that potential ownership group got undercut last week because a reporter from AP revealed that that group had put a study together, or had a study commissioned 18 months ago to look for 2 or 3 possible places where a new NFL stadium could be built in Toronto. And one of the guidelines of whoever this team is sold to is that they're going to be sold to a group that wants to keep the team in Buffalo. And if they're already planning stadium locations in Toronto, then that's a no-no. So it may take them out of the game, which is pretty interesting. So there's a lot of NHL tie-ins with the Buffalo Bills ownership, potential ownership.
Bon Jovi was also ownership of the arena football team here in town.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, Zach, right now, Bon Jovi could be the most unpopular rock star in Buffalo right now. His music has been banned on a number of Buffalo radio stations because he's part of this ownership group that potentially wants to move them to Toronto. Yeah,
that's bad.
Yeah, it's the little backlash. I mean, yeah,
that's crazy.
Well, I mean, I understand why. I mean, I've been here my entire life. I've been a Bills fan, to a greater or lesser extent my entire life. I would like to see them stay in Buffalo. I mean, we know Buffalo isn't the biggest city in the world, but Green Bay is in the NFL, and I think there's enough support to keep the team here if they build a downtown stadium. It all depends on who buys the team. I know Terry Pegula just sold a bunch of land down in Pennsylvania, gas and oil land, for like over $1 billion. So he actually has enough money to buy the team, and it's expected to go for over $1 billion US. So it's going to be pretty interesting the next few months to see where that, where that falls.
Pocket change, over $1 billion.
That's nothing.
Yeah, I got that in my passbook savings account.
Billion here, billion there, passbook savings account. Still have a passbook savings account, huh, Mike?
I just remember that. I had a passbook savings account when I was like 8 years old.
Oh yeah, remember when my parents got me one of those, to teach me all about money.
Yeah.
I hate to admit this, but
in a
previous life, I was a bank teller, and I know all about passbook savings accounts.
I heard some great bank stories from you. That's right.
That's right. So in my previous life, I spent a lot of time stamping those passbook savings books. So
I worked. One of my first jobs was working as a customer service rep at a call center for a local bank, and we handled calls from the branches regarding passbook savings accounts and different types of accounts. And the thing was that, this was just at the beginning when everything was just starting to go online and going away from paper transactions. And most of the people who had passbook savings accounts were either really young or really old and they wanted something in their hands. They wanted something to keep, writing down and receipts and everything else. And now, nowadays, unless you're going to an ATM machine or going into the branch, that doesn't happen anymore.
I know, and all the bad things. It's like the cell phones and the ATMs have really killed killed the American sitcom. You know, where all these situations that could happen before, where you were stuck without a cell phone or couldn't get money. I was stuck in New York City, you know, one time without money. It was the worst thing in the world. You know, before ATMs, it was just couldn't get my you know car out of my garage. Never happens anymore. And Eric Staal always talk about that too.
All right, let's
all
do
right.
it.
Let's see. That's okay.
Oh yeah, Eric, that's right. Eric Staal. I was going to mention that.
All right, here we go. I'm ready.
Tuesday, July 29th.
Thank you. Excellent. Am I clearer today, everybody? Do I look clearer?
Yes.
My picture?
Yeah, you look
disturbingly so.
You can see all my imperfections, or at least the ones that are visual. Okay. All right. Here we go. Ready?
Brother.
Hey, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, July 29th, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Kevin Allen.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. Now the most popular Hockey Buzzcasts on during the day in the summer. But yeah, and Josh has the day off today. He's en route to Florida. He'll be back tomorrow, talking to us from the famous Jeff Rimmer's home tomorrow. But yeah, he's on his way to Florida. But we are lucky to have Kevin Allen back, and we have Mike Agello, and I'm coming to you in vibrant color thanks to the power of the Ethernet cable. You know, 1994 technology helping me out again. So yep. Here we are, and we have already had some signings today, and we have some stuff we're going to get into with the Red Wings. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's talk about, to begin with, the Michael Frolik signing. 1 year, $3.3 million in Winnipeg. I'll start with you, Kev. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, you know, they really wanted to get a long-term deal done, and Alan Walsh, I exchanged emails with him today, and they had been working on a 5-year deal last week. They just couldn't get it done, and they just decided that the best way to go about it would be simply to accept a 1-year deal with sort of an understanding that in January they'll resume talking about a 5-year deal. And, you know, Frolik has really done a good job in Winnipeg, in my opinion. I think he was a nice acquisition for Cheveldayoff there. He stepped in. I think he had 16 goals. He was like a 42-point guy, something like that. But you know, he probably has never achieved the level of offense that probably we had hoped he would. But I think he's a pretty valuable player, especially when he's playing in a third-line role, because he can contribute offensively. He's a pretty skilled player, has a pretty good understanding. He's a smart player. So I think he's a guy that you want to get signed long term. And, again, I think the psychology of the contract, we just haven't adjusted to the idea that that's what you pay for guys like him now.
Yeah.
$3+ million. And, again, we've talked about it before, but nobody wanted to go to arbitration. That's just what we used as a tool to get both sides together. And in this case, they got together on a 1-year deal with maybe a handshake that sooner or later they're going to get a longer-term deal done.
Yeah, they have to, I would think. I mean, Mike, I thought this was a little bit more than I would have expected on a bridge deal, which tend to sometimes can be higher, sometimes less, but this is a little more than I would have expected. But then again, I guess we are paying to keep a guy in Winnipeg too, so that matters.
Yeah, and as Kevin said, Frolik is a 2-time 20-goal scorer. He scored, I think it was twice early in his career with Florida. He's won a Stanley Cup in Chicago. He's played well, since coming over from the Blackhawks with the Jets. This contract, I believe, puts him on the doorstep of unrestricted free agency, so the clock is ticking. I'm assuming that, as Kevin said, that they want to get him locked up on a long-term deal. But now with the specter of unrestricted free agency there, I would think that the price would probably be more than $3.3 million. I mean, when guys like Nikolai Kulemin and Mikhail Grabovski are making over $4 and close to $5, neither one of them has a Stanley Cup, and I think Kulemin had one 30-goal year, and the rest has been under 10 goals. I mean, a guy like Frolik who can maybe fit in a top 6 role, and if not a top 6, then probably a top 9 role. I think he's probably going to get closer to $4 million on the new deal. But it's a good short-term signing for Winnipeg, and I think they can avoid any controversy with this and concentrate more on what's going to happen with Evander Kane going down.
On the controversy and with Evander Kane and Dustin Byfuglien, and just one controversy avoided. Perhaps more interesting and a little bit more. I'm not going to say surprising, but we had Paige Lewis from Florida on last week. We talked about this possibility because I had mentioned this rumor that I had heard about Jimmy Hayes possibly going to Florida to join with his brother, right?
Kevin Hayes, yeah.
And I always get them confused. Yes, Jimmy Hayes. Kevin Hayes is the one that's already there. At the time, Paige, who was had said essentially she thought that the word on the street was that Jimmy Hayes wanted to be guaranteed that he would be an NHL player and not going to the AHL to play, and they didn't know if that was something the Florida Panthers would be willing to do. But in terms of he's signed away from the Chicago Blackhawks. Kevin, what do you know of Jimmy Hayes? Mike? First, what you say, Mike?
Jimmy Hayes was the one who. It's easy to get the Hayeses confused. There are too many damn Hayeses. But Jimmy Hayes is the one who reached the contract today. It was a
right. And Kevin Hayes. We're talking about Kevin Hayes is the other one. Yeah, I know. So the question is, does this bring Kevin Hayes from Chicago? Sorry, I'm confusing myself again. Yes, I apologize on that.
I mean,
wait. I've always correct.
Yeah. Yes. I've always
Jimmy
been
Hayes was going to arbitration.
Jimmy
with
Hayes,
the Florida Panthers, and is signed. Kevin
not
Hayes.
Anymore. Yeah, not anymore. He's not. Right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys. Sorry, rough morning. I'm trying to figure out my haze. Got my haze in a row. All right. So
you're in a purple haze. Yes.
I'm in a purple haze. Thank you. So here you go. So the question is, does this bring Kevin Hayes to Florida? And like we said before, Paige said, she wasn't really that sold on that idea. So Jimmy Hayes, Kevin, what do you know of Jimmy Hayes? Is this a good move?
Well, I mean, you have to have depth on teams, even teams that have, are struggling to make the playoffs. And, he's had like 17 goals in 94 NHL games. I don't think he's ever going to be a scorer, but he's 6'6". And the Panthers need depth. They need guys up front. They need size, and even guys who aren't particularly physical. If you're big, it wears down the other team when they got to move you around a little bit because it's a lot of weight to move around, a lot of size to move around. But more importantly, I think he's just another piece for a Panthers team that I think will be improved this season. I really do. I mean, Huberdeau is going to be better. Barkov's going to be better. Luongo will be over 82 games, an upgrade over their goaltending that they've had previously. I like, people thought they overpaid for Bolin. They thought they, overpaid to get Jokinen. And in both cases, that's probably true. But in each case, you got guys who are 200-foot players who will make the team better. Like, I like Bolin as a player. Is he a $5 million player? No. But will he help the Panthers get closer to the playoffs? I don't know if it's enough to get him in, to be frank. But I think they're much better prepared for a playoff fight with guys like Boland and Jokin. And don't forget Willie Mitchell. Again, this is another player that everybody said they overpaid for, paying over more than $4 million. But you have to do that if you're in a market like Florida in order to get them to go down there. So what would be worse? Overpaying, which they did, or not getting anybody and just saying to fans, well, sorry, we couldn't do it. So I like the moves, and Hayes is just another depth player. Yeah. They kept him in the fold.
Now, and I agree with, and also if you're going to overpay, in my opinion, overpay with character. Like you got character guys here. You got Bolin and Mitchell. They're the kind of guys you want around a young upcoming team. They're the kind of guys that you want them to see you want the players to see how they approach the rink every day, that kind of thing. Right. So they're getting like mini assistant coaches in those guys, especially with Willie Mitchell. Who's been such a stalwart on defense and has won Stanley Cups, and both have won Stanley Cups. But I like the move, Mike.
Yeah, and I mean Florida did this a few years ago, and he had a lot less left in the tank than Bolin does right now. But they did the same thing a few years ago with a guy like John Madden, who they brought down late in his career, and showed some of the young players how to play. I mean, I think that's what is at play with the signing of Bolin. I know that Toronto wanted him back. He was a good character guy in the room. they didn't, they just weren't prepared to pay $5.5 million for Boland's services. Mitchell as well. He's a steady veteran presence, and with with Gudbranson, who's only 23 years old, with Kulikov, who they just signed to a 3-year extension, and now with Aaron Ekblad, who the number 1 pick in the draft in Philadelphia last month. They got a core of really promising young defensemen. Where they need, we know that Huberdeau has top end talent. He won the Rookie of the Year. He had a bad sophomore year. Barkov had a really good year as an 18-year-old. But what they need are these young guys like Bukestad and Jimmy Hayes. Now, Hayes scored 11 goals last year in like 53 games. That's not bad. He's never going to be a top 6 guy. He's sort of a big, lumbering, really big kid, has some offensive skill. So they need contributions from guys like that, score 10, 12 goals on the 3rd or 4th line if they're going to have a hope at making the playoffs. To your point before, I don't think Kevin Hayes is going to end up going to Florida simply because, the attraction of maybe having the brother combo there is something that maybe Dale Talon wants, but I think Kevin Hayes wants a guarantee that he's going to play in the NHL, and I don't know if Florida can even promise him that. And the thing is, he might be fighting against his brother for the 12th or 13th forward spot on that team. So I think he's probably going to end up going someplace else, maybe a place like Buffalo, who's got a lot of spots up front.
Yeah, the biggest acquisition for the Panthers has been the new ownership.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a real commitment here. I think to making sure they get in the playoffs. There was a lot of talk about that at the draft. Beyond the surface of below the surface of the decision whether or not to make Ekblad was the idea of the ownership wanted to do it right. That was what I heard over and over, that there was pressure on Talon. Okay, we got to do this right. And I think ultimately they made the right decision. I'm not a big, as you know, proponent of trading that number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Because in most times and historically it hasn't worked out for the teams. Because you're giving up a potential superstar and you never get a superstar back. I like the moves they made. I found it amusing that I got so many emails criticizing the Willie Mitchell acquisition as a guy who was too slow to play in the league. And after I had watched him in the Stanley Cup final, helped the Kings win the Stanley Cup championship, and I thought he was a pretty important piece on that defense.
He was. Talk to Kings fans, and they'll say the same thing.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I've been around long enough to know that when you're a veteran player and you don't have great mobility, playing with the right defensive group is important. And maybe they don't have that group in Florida. I mean, I get that, but I think just as Mike articulated, I think his importance to that group is he could end up being the most important acquisition depending on what he does for Ekblad.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
He skated around the ice pretty slowly carrying that Stanley Cup. So
yeah, he's criticism. I know, he'll take that, right? And of course, yesterday, for the second straight day of the podcast, we've had news break at like 2:01 when we finished our podcast. So maybe by starting at 1:30 today, we're about to have news break any minute. But exactly 24 hours ago, right now, the Maple Leafs signed another 1-year deal. They've signed this is their 3rd, I guess, now. This time signing Daniel Winnick. Another talking of bottom 6 big players who can contribute points. This is a real I know, Mike, you were happy about this right when it happened because we were on our post show. And Kevin, you like this trade or signing?
I do. I like it a lot. What I like about Winnick is he's a role player. He's an important role player, but he has enough offensive skill that he can slide up and play in your top 6 if you need him. And I think for just over $1 million, it's a good fit for that team. And I think they got good value out of that. I think they're at 24 players now. For adding him at the last guy as a missing piece, I like the move a lot.
Yeah, Mike, what are your thoughts on Winnick?
Well, I like his versatility. I mean, as Kevin said, he scored 30 points last year. That was his career high, 24 assists with Anaheim. And he's apparently somebody that the Corsi fanatics love. He's a good puck possession guy, and from the interviews of him and Kyle Dubas, the new Leafs assistant general manager, it appears that the Leafs showed interest in him only in the last week, which would indicate to me that maybe Dubas had some input in the signing of Winnick. What to me is interesting is the fact that the Leafs now, with all the additions they've made, the most recent two being David Booth and Winnick, they have 17 forwards right now under one-way contracts. I mean, to me, and also with the signing of Reimer, and actually you indicated in a blog a couple of days ago that there might be something going on here in terms of a trade. If they have that many extra forwards,
something's got to give.
Yeah, then something is potentially going to happen here. I mean, they have, right now, if you looked at their roster, and we're not going to go into too much microscopic detail on the Leafs here, but they can send guys like Colton Orr and Fraser McLaren and a few other guys down to the Toronto Marlies, and it's not really going to affect them in terms of salary cap. So they actually have more than just the $3 million in cap room that they have right now. But
right.
To me, it looks like they're setting up something where it's a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 type deal, and who knows what that'll be. But I think they're positioned well for a deal like that.
So Kevin, you're a hockey card fan, right? You're a big proponent of hockey cards.
But certainly I know about them, and I collected them as a kid, and I still own some of my original cards. So yes. Yeah.
I'm not saying in an accusatory way. You don't have to justify yourself. I'm a hockey fan of hockey cards as well. Mike, I thought you would like this. That that Steven Stamkos apparently has autographed a photoshopped Toronto Maple Leafs hockey card. So to me, I'm going to show you this picture here. Bring it up. There you go. So this was sent to me. That of course, Stamkos wasn't thinking when he did this about the fact that it's 2014 and there's the internet. But
it's 2 years. I'm telling.
2 years away, right?
2 years. That's 2 years away. Yeah. For every other webcast we're going to do, we're going to be mentioning Stamkos in Toronto.
No. It's not going to happen. I will. It's not going to happen.
That's a phrase that early in my journalistic career we didn't think about or talk about much, and now we talk about it all the time. He just didn't think. With the Twitter account now, we talk about that all the time. They just didn't think. But I want to bring up something about Corsi that maybe you guys can help me on this, because I simply don't understand. Like, why are people who don't like Corsi so upset about it? Like, even if you don't care one way or the other, like, why is it such a big issue to people because if you don't like the Corsi rating system, the people, when I read my emails and stuff, like, they're so upset about it. Like, to me, it's like, the quality start in baseball. Like, I'm a baseball fan. I think it's absurd stat, but I never give it any thought. Like, I'm not upset about it. I don't care about it. Like, but the people, the anti-Corsi people, like, they just hate it. Like, it makes them angry.
They're looking to you as one of the elder statesmen of the sport to agree with them. No one ever talks to Corsi about Corsi. I'm not a Corsi fan at all, but I'm not angry at it. But I'm not a fan of it. But I think it's perfectly fine. It's just statistics, right? I wouldn't build a team on it.
I actually sort of like it. I mean, I looked it up. I don't spend a lot of time looking at it, but during the playoffs, I took note that some of the big Corsi guys were guys who were doing really well in the playoffs, and I said, but I've never I just don't have the passion one way or the other on it that most people seem to have on it. Like, I don't understand why people are so upset about it.
Well, because it's a bone of contention. That's really what. Because I deal with. Let's just say this: the people who are Corsi fanatics, they're mostly of the younger generation. They look upon the anti-Corsi people as Neanderthals. And when you don't buy into that theory, they use that to point how out of touch you are. Now the thing is, like, when it comes to baseball, I'm a Moneyball type of guy who believes that on base percentage and some of the stats that Bill James came up with back in the day are valuable in determining the value of a baseball player. I'm not convinced yet that Corsi and Fenwick and a number of the stats that have been developed over the last few years are, an accurate indicator of the quality of a player. I have yet to be sold on that. If I'm convinced after a while that it's based in truth and based in fact, I'll buy in completely. But right now, I'm a skeptic, and that skepticism has brought some criticism of me, of basically saying, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're not buying into Corsi. You like plus minus. You're out of touch with reality. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I just don't believe in it right now. I haven't been sold yet. So
that's the other. Mike is a skeptic on my board behind me because I just want to remind myself of that one. So.
Yeah, is anybody shocked that a stat that measures puck possession, that someone who's good and has that kind of stat is going to be a good hockey player? I mean, didn't we already know that? Like the puck possession guys.
I mean, that's the thing about puck possession. People go, you never guess who has the most puck possession. I'm like, I think I probably would. I mean, I watch the games. I have a good sense of who's carrying the puck.
I don't think we're surprised about it. I guess when I've looked at it though, and I'm somewhat intrigued by it to be honest. I mean, I'm interested in it, but I don't spend an inordinate amount of time on it. But where I find it's interesting is not the star players or the bottom feeders, but it's right in the middle there, where suddenly you're looking at guys and you're trying to decide, okay, like how good is Mike Camilleri, and you compare him to some other players, and you look at that Corsi and you go, So I see some value in it. I don't think that I'm going to see it as the end all, but I'm getting into baseball, which they were ahead of the curve, and with regard to these analytics, like some of the stuff that Mike was just talking about. The problem with the baseball analytics is that you can sort of make any guy look better than he really is. I live in Detroit, and there's a catcher, Alex Ville, who we all watch, and he has a huge hole in his swing, and he batting 225. And he strikes out at really inopportune times.
Right.
But, through his on-base percentage, because he walks a lot, and the fact that he gets a lot of extra base hits when he does get a hit on the rare occasions he does, you can prove that Alex Avila is a better than average Major League player. But when you watch him, you're going, no, that's not right. So that's the fear with any of these statistics.
Yeah, back in the day, Kevin, a guy like Rob Deere, who used to play for the Tigers, over a decade ago, the guy had a sub 200 batting average, but he walked 120 times, and so he was probably a guy that a guy like Bill James, and he hit 30 home runs, so that was a guy that Bill James probably loved. What I find interesting, and the hiring of Kyle Dubas in Toronto has sort of been the focal point of this in the last couple weeks, is the criticism of the Leafs, basically going away from the old school guys like Dave Poulin and Claude Loisel, and now this young guy, this 28-year-old guy, is coming in. Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet had a pretty good line regarding the battle on Twitter between the Corsi fanatics and the anti-Corsi faction. He says he's calling it a proxy war between the jocks and the geeks, and I think that's what it is. You're gonna have this fight for months and years until one side wins, and who knows which side that's going to be.
And all hail the geeks for us being able to tell the jocks who's good and who's not. I mean, that's pretty. I think that's something that we've never been able to do.
Well, let's talk about Eric Staal and move on.
Yeah, this is a whole discussion for someday, Kev, because I honestly really like that discussion. The Corsi thing is right up there with the Twitter thing. Rainy day discussions for me, because that's like a.
Yeah, and we should get Rob Volman on. We had him on one of our previous.
No, I would like that. I mean, the last thing I'll say on Corsi before we're talking about Eric Staal's horrid injury, is that as a Stratomatic player back in the day, Corsi would make Stratomatic so much better, right? There's got to be a new version of Stratomatic that and that makes me. I always wanted to make a better Stratomatic hockey. And that I think that with Corsi I could, like I look at the statistics, I'm like, man, I could so combine Dungeons and Dragons with Stratomatic and put Corsi together and really just rock this thing. And that I love. I mean, we love statistics. It also was really funny when I came across the other day. I was cleaning out my my mom's closet, my old closet, and I came across all of my old Hockey Digest magazines, and which I collected. You know, the little tiny Hockey Digests that were like palm size. And my favorite Hockey Digest feature was the Who's Better features, which I think they sort of became famous for. You know, like it basically was like, who's better, Wayne Simmons or
Billy Leino.
just any, and they would pick bizarre players. It wouldn't just be like Stamkos versus so and so. It would be middle of the road players like you're saying, Camilleri or Simmons. And Corsi sort of does like enable you to actually make more arguments on the who's better arguments, because back then,
Yeah, I mean, the more statistics, the better. I mean, we're all into this. We like all this. So, just because I don't like the quality start in baseball doesn't mean that I won't look at it if it's in front of me.
Right, and plus minus has always been one of those statistics. Like plus minus has always been a Corsi-like statistic to me, and it's. I mean, baseball. I'm not as big a baseball fan as either of you guys. I'll admit that, but baseball to me seemed much easier with statistics because it is such a one-on-one sport. It's just like pitcher versus batter. Where hockey, it's such a team sport. It feels difficult to me. But
yeah, and I think the big problem is the fact that until you have a uniform way of collecting statistics, and we all know, like, you go to have a game at Joe Louis Arena and they will count shots a lot more liberally than they will count shots at the First Niagara Center. I've heard indications where, like, in one arena, a goaltender faced 50 shots, and the guy says that game was played in Toronto, that would have been 28 shots. So until there is some uniformity in what was the old
the shot keeping in the NHL, the shot keeping is great. That's a whole other argument, right?
Or the famous or the infamous Dan McGillis story where he was in Philadelphia, I believe, and Bobby Clark told the statisticians to make sure that he or it was in Edmonton, that he everything that basically he touched anybody, it was a hit, and he led the NHL in hits, and then either he was traded or he was signed by Philadelphia, and then they realized this guy wasn't as big a hitter as supposedly his reputation was in Edmonton. Until you have some uniformity there, I don't think you can really base the quality of players on stats that have that human element in them. So
that's the tough part, right? It is. I agree, and I mean the best example of craziness of stats this year for me came actually when I was like sitting next to Kevin in I guess it was Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals, and the Madison Square Garden, where they have the most beautiful, by far, the beautiful press box, the most beautiful scoreboard. It's just nuts. The scoreboard wasn't functioning. Remember this during the whole first period of the game. And neither was NHL.com. It was a huge issue in general. No one knew how many shots were happening. It was completely insane. People were freaking out, And on the scoreboard in Madison Square Garden, they actually tell you who's on the ice. It's that detailed. I've never seen a scoreboard in any professional rank say these are the players on the ice right now. Which is, I
love that, by the way,
because you could look there or you could look on the ice. But either way, you could tell who's on the ice at the time. So the Rangers took at least 6 or 7 shots in that first period, and were credited, I think, with 3. And we could remember 6 or 7 off the top of our head. So yeah, I mean, I talk to Scoop Cooper in Philly all the time because he's a shots guy. He does his own stats too, and he says, yeah, it's subjective, but that's okay until we get our little chips in every player's uniforms to tell when they hit somebody. We won't know anyway. So moving on to Eric Staal. This does not seem to be a really serious situation. It sounds like he's going to be back before training camp. He was in Philadelphia yesterday, which, of course, if he had been seen, would have led to all sorts of rumors. But no one saw him. He was just here to check out his doctor, or a doctor here, who and he's having a procedure now to repair what is being called a core muscle injury. I don't know what are core muscles.
Sports hernia. It's for the sports hernia.
That's a hernia. Okay, all right, there you go. Which is like a bad groin pull. No, that's not the same thing, obviously.
No, not even close. Because of the skating, that's very difficult. But this is another. It's just bad luck for Eric Staal. I mean, if you remember, he went through the same thing last season. He had he had the knee injury in training camp. He was, still rehabbing from the injury, and he had a poor season. Maybe his worst as a pro. And like, he is so crucial to that team. Like, the star player is obviously crucial to all teams, but in the case of the Carolina Hurricanes, when they don't have the same depth of stars that, say, some of the other top teams, they can't afford to have him have an off season. So, I think this is a difficult issue for them, simply because there's always uncertainty involving an injury, and they think it's going to be fine, and probably it will. But given that he's coming off his worst season, and the Carolina Hurricanes haven't made the playoffs since 2009, they got to this is crucial for them. I think this was tough news today for them.
Yeah, it's not easy for sure. According to the SHL Twitter page, Detroit's Michael Samuelsson has signed with Djurgården in Sweden. This came out 2 hours ago. You know anything about this, Kev? It's true.
No, I don't, but certainly it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, he hasn't played well enough, and he's been hurt, where I couldn't see him signing with an NHL team. So it just makes sense for him to go back. And when he was right, he was a very effective player. He had a big shot. Scored timely goals, and the Red Wings were happy to have him when he was playing well. But he's been hurt in the last couple of seasons. He's really never been back to the form he was. Yeah,
that's for sure. Also, another weird Detroit news that just came out 2 hours ago, that the IIHF has announced a 3-game suspension for Justin Abdelkader for his head hit at the 2014 Worlds. This will take effect if he plays at the 2015 Worlds, I guess. Which he hopes not to be playing at.
Yeah, he was very deserving of that penalty. It was an inopportune penalty too, because it was a major penalty they had to kill off. But he was captain of that team, as I recall, and he was trying to stir up his team, and he went too far, and the IHF. And Jeff Sauer, by the way, is part of that disciplinary committee.
Okay.
The former Wisconsin coach, who's well known in USA hockey circles. What I remember about it, it seems to me that was a well-deserved penalty. And who knows? I mean, he could be back in international competition. He was an Olympic candidate at the start of the process. They viewed him as a role player. He's a big guy. Who plays a feisty game. He's, to me, at the start of it, I thought he had a pretty good chance of grabbing one of those fourth line spots on that U.S. Olympic team, because he can play, as we all know, with skilled players. I mean, Pavel Datsyuk personally requested Abdelkader to play on his line. He likes him a lot. He thinks he adds something by his aggressive style.
Well, that's saying something.
Let me just rant that, and I know this has absolutely no chance of happening going forward, but I mean, I just think that the NHL player participation in the World Championships is just a waste. I mean, we were just talking about Eric Staal. I mean, Eric Staal took a hit from Alex Edler 2 years ago, or 2 summers ago. That cost him, I know he was able to come back early in the season, but he didn't come back completely right. And, it affected the Carolina Hurricanes. There's been other instances in the past where players have been injured at the World Championships where it doesn't benefit, the NHL team for these players to play unless it's a player like, I know that the Leafs sent like Morgan Riley or Jake Gardiner to their, young players who were getting experience. But, the upside and the downside, I have the same feeling about the World Championships as I do the All-Star game. I don't see any benefit in it, and I'd like to see it completely wiped away, but is there a chance of that happening? Probably not.
No, probably
not.
Well,
I completely disagree, obviously, with that. There's really no comparison between an All-Star game and the World Championships.
Well, true.
I mean, this is still an important international event, especially for European players, and I think although the North Americans haven't embraced it quite like the Europeans, I think some of them now do. I'd like to see actually more participation. It's a pretty big event, and if you're a pure hockey fan, like I every year make sure that I try to cover the U.S. team the best I can from North America while I'm covering the playoffs, just because I consider it almost doing a little missionary work, because I think that tournament is so important. And we all love the World Cup, and we're all hoping that we can get back to that. And we love Olympic hockey. Well, this is I covered the World Cup, or excuse me, the World Championships in Vienna during the first the lockout in 2005, and it was probably one of the most entertaining, some of the most entertaining hockey I've ever seen, because obviously they had all the NHL players there. Yeah. So, I think it's still important, and I think players should want to go. I mean, if you're a hockey player and you're a pro player, your body should and your mind should be geared toward playing from September through June. That's the way you should think. And when your team doesn't make it, you got a chance to go represent your country in an international tournament. And I certainly understand those who can't go because of contractual issues and so forth, and injuries. A lot of them are beat up. But if you're young and you're healthy, I say go, because you love playing the sport, and I still think it's important. And you, for the most part, not always, but you can get insurance to cover your contracts. And is there a risk? Sure, but you're usually covered.
Usually covered. Well, another news breaking right now. Ken Hitchcock has apparently reached out to sign a player that I thought he was going to, that I knew he liked, but the Blues have signed Peter Mueller to a 2-way contract. And this is a good one, a good signing for the Blues in my opinion, and the kind of guy that Hitchcock likes. I mean, Mueller has high potential, injuries, issues. It is a 2-way contract, which I'm kind of surprised. I didn't think Mueller was going to take a 2-way deal, because he did play well in Switzerland last year. But thoughts on Mueller, Kev?
Well, I mean, this is a player that took advantage of the World Championships. That's where everybody saw him. They may or may not have seen him in the Swiss League this year, where he played really, really well. But they all saw him at the World Championships, and apparently they liked what they saw. And I don't know the details of this, but it could be one of those things where if he doesn't make the parent club, maybe he's allowed to go back to Switzerland. Which I think is a possibility. I mean, he liked it over there, from what I've been told, and he played well over there, and he sort of rediscovered his game that he seemed to have lost at the NHL level. And this is a good roll of the dice.
Yeah.
At one point everybody thought he was going to be a top player, and it hasn't panned out, but maybe he learned some stuff over on that wider international ice. It's
concussions and issues like that we've seen before too, which have hindered him. So I guess, and a lot of that's pretty random. So hopefully he's healed and he'll be back and ready to go.
I mean,
I've heard some people suggested too that it's just maturity as well. That when he was young, just didn't have the level of maturity, and obviously as you get older, you acquire that.
Yeah, yes, you do, and along with other things too.
Yeah, I mean, he scored 54 points as a 19-year-old in Phoenix. And then has never been able, and the concussion issue is part of this. But other than a brief stint with Colorado after being traded by the Coyotes, he really hasn't enjoyed any kind of consistent offensive success. So I mean, this is a no lose. It's a low risk, no lose move for the Blues, who I think their concerns I think going into this year have to be more Jake Allen and Brian Elliott as an unproven tandem than their forwards. I mean, they've added Paul Stastny now. Mueller is probably a depth signing. Their defense is one of the best 6 defensemen in the league and best cores in the league.
Yeah, not the best.
I think their concerns have to be in net, and this is just a good depth move. So I don't see any risk.
Yeah, so let's talk about 2 more players, and then we'll call it a day. We're going to talk Detroit today with lots of stuff happening and different things. So, as normal, we'll just push that to another day, and because we have enough news to talk about today, let's talk a little bit about Michael Del Zotto, who still is not signed. A lot of people have there's tons of depending on who you listen to, tons of theories on this, but and they range from pretty crazy, bizarre to just he just has lost there, can't play defense. I keep hearing the Red Wings in this one, Kev. And tied to the Alfredson situation. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I keep hearing. Have you heard anything about Del Zotto?
I haven't heard Detroit and Del
Okay.
Zotto, but I know they're still looking around, poking around on their defense. So, they would, I think, have to make a move. It would require maybe moving Kindle.
Right.
If the, but if they were in on Del Zotto, it would be a depth move where he could maybe start out in Grand Rapids or so
Right.
forth. But I mean, usually the simplest explanation in these cases is reality, and that is he's good offensively, but not quite good enough to overcome the fact that he hasn't been good defensively and he hasn't progressed. That's the biggest issue, and ultimately he's going to sign with somebody. They'll take a chance. I mean, he's way too young, and too many defensemen have blossomed later in their careers. And I'm actually a little surprised that he hasn't signed yet, though. I mean, I would have thought somebody would have given him just a shot.
Yeah, it seems like he's taking some good chances. The other one I've heard is Ville Leino's name mentioned a little bit. I've heard it connected with Philly again, and I know the Flyers, and especially Claude Giroux, particularly, are Leino supporters. They couldn't sign him here, obviously, because of the money. He has definitely, obviously, decreased. His value has decreased, and his game has decreased a lot since he was here. But he had great chemistry with Claude Giroux.
Right.
And with Hartnell being gone now, who was one of Giroux's line mates, I could see the Flyers taking this shot at Leino just to see how it plays out, to see if he can rekindle it, because he was quite a player here. And he definitely had his heyday during the Flyers Stanley Cup run to the finals against Chicago. Mike, you've watched Leino.
Yeah, I mean, if you put him on the wing and you make him a complementary player to talent like Giroux, I think that's a move that would be great for the Flyers, because you probably have to pay less than $1 million on a 1-year deal. I don't think he's going to take a two-way based on where he is in his career. But if it's a 1-year deal for say $850,000, that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, I think his durability is in question. He was hurt constantly with the Sabres, and the fact that the Sabres, most of the time that he was in Buffalo, and played him at center, which is just not the right place for him to play. So, but if he goes to Philadelphia and he plays on a line with Giroux, or even on a line with a second line as a complimentary guy, I think it would work. Just let me touch quickly on Del Zotto.
Yeah.
I think one factor with Del Zotto is that he's a UFA right now because they didn't qualify him. But if he signs a 1-year deal, he's a restricted free agent with whoever he signs with. So he might be looking for a 2-year deal that will put him on the doorstep of unrestricted free agency, and that's why he's maybe trying to pick his scenario and where he's going. He's being more careful. And I think he wants to go someplace where he has a chance at success, chance of scoring some points, maybe playing on the power play. If that happens, then in arbitration next year, he probably gets a significant raise. If he's going to be placed someplace where he's a depth defenseman and a 5'6" guy and he doesn't score a lot of points, then his defensive liabilities are going to be accentuated, and he probably won't fit well.
It's kind of pointless to assign him as anything but an offensive defenseman, I mean, and even at that, you have to, if you need a power play guy, or he's better, but he hasn't been as good as you'd expect. But he's still young for defense. I mean, I can't help but think that. I can't help but defenders don't really come into their own until they're almost near 30 in my mind. So he's still young on that end. But all right, Kevin, anything to add with Leino?
Well, I was surprised, to be honest, that one of the bottom teams didn't take a shot at him. A team like Phoenix, in terms of a team looking for offense, I thought was another possible option. Obviously, either his asking price was too much, or they questioned his durability. Even the Islanders, a team scrambling to make the playoffs, and where there's pressure on them. Like, to me, the more offensive skilled players you have, the better when you're in their position. So, I guess I'm a little surprised because he really has demonstrated some a high level of skill at times, and he was out of position in Buffalo. Plus, I think the pressure got to him of that contract. Right off the bat, I thought it was, it's almost as if he knew that he wasn't deserving of that deal. And some of the guys are. I remember when Marty Lapointe signed with Boston for the $5 million. I remember when you just interviewed him, you knew he felt like, I can't believe they're giving me this. I think with the right team, I think he could contribute. I don't think he's a star player, but he certainly has gifts that could help a team's offense.
Yeah, he's been a clutch player in the past for Philly at least, and they really liked him here. And you're right, I could see him not handling that situation very well as well, having known him enough when he was here. I used to joke with him that he was like an Amishman, like that's what he reminded me of. I thought he was. Like
yeah. I mean, the personality, like he struggled to deal with Mike Babcock.
Yeah,
he was can be a very harsh coach, and I remember a conversation I had with him about Babcock and just the challenges of that. And if you can't handle Mike Babcock because he's not the only tough coach in the league, then trying to live up to the expectations of the level of contract that he signed, also had to be difficult as well.
Yeah.
Lindy Ruff wasn't exactly a cream puff, so yeah.
No,
and then like you said, playing him out of position was tricky. Well, that's all the time we have for today, guys. But I really appreciate everything, all you in the chat room. We continue to make this show a lot of fun, and all of you keep downloading the show, which it keeps increasing every day, which is amazing to me in the summer how many people want to talk hockey, and that's why we're still doing it. I mean, originally the plan was that Mike and I we said, well, we'll keep doing this until like the maybe first week of July, and then go back to 3 days a week, and then maybe once a week in August, but you guys are really into it, and we're into it, and it's become part of it's become the most fun part of my day. I love doing it. So so we're going to keep doing it. We'll be back again tomorrow, back at 1 o'clock tomorrow, as normal, as we will be for the rest of the week. I don't foresee us being in any different times. So enjoy the night. Hope you get outside with your families. And in the Northeast here, we're having like this wonderful fall like day. I don't know why. Last night it was 55 degrees outside and beautiful. So global warming, that's what we get. Anyway, remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. See you soon. Thank you, guys.